Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our virtual information evening, slightly reimagined. I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties that we were experiencing. We have done a couple that have gone with no problems, but we understand that lots of people had no sound. So we apologise for that. We will now, we can't see a quick way to resolve that, so we're going to look at recording it and sharing it with you. So the aim of the evening is to provide a bit of an update regarding your child's year group, so year 8, to reassure you a bit about our plans for reopening in September, and also to have a go at answering some of the questions that some of you have submitted prior to this evening. So I'm really pleased that we're joined by Mr. James, your child's head of year, Mr. Martin, our head teacher, and we're going to hand over now to Mr. Martin for his introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mrs. Atkins. And again, apologies to people watching who tried to watch the live stream that didn't come off on this occasion. So really warm welcome to this information event. One of the things that we tried to do hard during this lockdown is to maintain the strongest possible sense of connectedness within our community. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity to communicate with you right now. And I'm going to start off with a slide that I displayed in the final assemblies that I gave over 100 days ago, just before we went into lockdown. And I displayed this slide full of Roald Dahl characters. Maybe that brings back some nice childhood memories for some of you. And I was making the point to the students that Roald Dahl wasn't just a good children's writer, he was an accomplished writer for adults as well. And perhaps best known for this collection of short stories, Tales of the Unexpected. I think they were televised way back in the 70s or 80s as well. And each of those stories had one thing in common, which was that they ended with a completely unpredictable and surprising twist in the tale. And the reason I was talking about that with the young people was to explain that it felt at that time, and I think still does feel, that we're living through our very own, very real tale of the unexpected, with the coronavirus pandemic having turned our worlds upside down. And who would have imagined at the beginning of the year that a microscopically small virus from the other side of the world would effectively bring the globe to its knees? And I think even now, whilst pleasingly the situation seems to be getting better in our country at any rate, we still feel that we're living with that uncertainty and we're not quite sure what's going to happen on the next page. And whilst it can be enjoyable to read Tales of the Unexpected, it's not so enjoyable, I'm sure you'll agree, to live through one. We will all have experienced a wide range of emotions. Some of them may be positive. I was chatting to some students the other day who said they've actually really enjoyed having a bit more time at home with their families, having a bit more time to pursue their hobbies and interests. But unfortunately, some of those emotions will have been negative too, as we worried about our families' health and well-being, and sadly, in some cases, feared for our livelihoods as well. And naturally, as parents and carers, I'm sure some of that anxiety is centered around your children and their all-important education. And you may have been asking yourselves questions about, what they are missing out on through not being in school, not just academically, but socially, how they're going to catch up if you feel they've fallen behind when we are back in school, and perhaps thinking longer term as well around how this period of disruption to their education might affect their futures. I think those are all natural concerns that all conscientious parents and guardians are going to feel to a greater or lesser extent. And so we're really conscious of that. And one of the things we hope to achieve tonight is to give you a little bit of reassurance where we can. And we're going to try and do that in two ways. So in a moment, Mr. James, head of year 8, is going to do a lot of looking back and just going over some of the provision that we've put in place, some of which you will be aware of, but other bits you may not have known have been going on. And then Mrs. Atkins, Heather, is going to do some looking forward and start explaining some of our plans around reopening in September, with the big caveat that we only received official government guidance relatively recently, so we haven't had a great deal of time to put together comprehensive plans yet, although I'm sure they will be in place for September. Before we do that, I just want to close my section with a really heartfelt thanks to you as parents and carers. I think never has it been as important as it has over the lockdown months to be working in really effective partnership with each other, and that's absolutely gone on. We've really relied on your support. I know there have been occasions when probably our provision hasn't matched your expectations, but overall the feedback that we've received has been overwhelmingly positive. And I think together as a school, but also as a parent body, we should be proud of those achievements. I want to say really specific thank yous, actually. Firstly, I want to thank you for all of the work and energy you've expended in encouraging your children and supporting them to engage with the online learning. We absolutely appreciate that isn't always a simple thing to do, and has possibly led to the odd conflict situation. We're very aware that we have a setup in school designed to keep students engaged, that we have things like purple postcards, reward experiences, or on the flip side, detentions and the like that we can use. We're also very aware that we can say goodbye at 3 o'clock and you can't do that. So we don't underestimate the magnitude of that task of encouraging your children to engage in the learning. Secondly, I want to thank many of you who've ended up being surrogate teachers and teaching assistants for Wheatley Park, supporting your children with their online learning. And again, whilst my staff will have formal teaching qualifications and years of experience and only one subject to deliver, unless you're a teacher yourself, you won't have those privileges. And actually, even if you are a teacher, I'm sure you'll agree that teaching your own children is quite a different proposition to teaching somebody else's. And again, as surrogate teachers for Wheatley Park, unfortunately, you haven't been receiving a salary either. So thank you very much for all your efforts in that regard. Thank you too for your understanding, because I know that many of you have appreciated that our staff have continued to be working just as hard, if not harder. And if maybe the feedback hasn't been as comprehensive as you've wanted, or there hasn't been a high enough percentage of live lessons to match your expectations, that's not to a lack of will, but it is because our teachers have had lots of other things to contend with, and particularly those who've got young families at home whom they're having to educate alongside providing remote education for your children. So thank you for your understanding. And finally, thank you in advance for continuing to work in effective partnership with us as we move towards September in what is going to be a situation that's far from normal. But I am confident that by continuing to work closely together, we can ensure that this particular tale of the unexpected has a happy ending for your child and their education here at Wheatley Park. So that's it for me for now. I'm going to pass back to Heather for the next section of the evening. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks very much, Mr. Martin. And it's my great pleasure now to hand over to Mr. James. He's going to be talking, looking back and talking a bit about what Year 8 have been up to and how they've got on during lockdown. Thanks very much, Mr. James. Over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Atkins. And hello to all the Year 8 parents and carers out there, and obviously all the young guys who are also watching. Please, first of all, accept my sincere apologies for the technical glitch we have suffered, but thankfully we have been resourceful and I've got this backup option. But yeah, brilliant to finally get an opportunity to sit down and have a chat with you all. Obviously, I'm very conscious that as of yet, I haven't made any sort of formal introduction since taking over from Mrs. Ainsworth. And for me, I think it's a really sort of a good point and a good time for me to thank Mrs. Ainsworth for her brilliant efforts, because she's definitely left the year group in a really good position moving forward. I also want to echo sort of Mr. Martin's thanks in terms of how brilliant you guys have been from home in terms of keeping our Year 8s on track. And I know as a teacher myself how tough it is to motivate young people in terms of a classroom setting. So I can only imagine how difficult it would be from a home perspective when you've got Xbox, younger siblings, lots of things going on. But yeah, as Mrs. Atkins says, I'm here tonight just to sort of reflect on the lockdown period as a whole. And obviously over the 17 weeks, us as a head of year team have been incredibly proud of the efforts of all the young people. I think in terms of from an academic perspective, there's been several positives. As you know, our sort of one of our barometers in terms of how hard kids are working here is our postcard system. And in total across the lockdown, Year 8 have received 719 postcards, which is a brilliant amount. Some more percentages here for you. So 79% of all students have completed their core subjects, which again, it will put them in a really good position moving forward to next year. And around 1/3 of our students have completed 100% of their work across the lockdown. And that for me, in a year when they've got their guided choices and they're moving on to different topics, again, is absolutely amazing. So I'm really proud as their head of year. But I think also in terms of reflection, it's important to consider the social achievements of the young people, and it's undoubted that there's been many of that. So in terms of obviously the challenges of maintaining friendships from home, the young people have done really well in that, and they've maintained those over Google Meets, Zoom, whatever, and that's going to put them in a really good position coming back in September. They've also engaged in Google Meets via tutor time, so their tutors have brilliantly put on Google Meets every Friday, and we've had high attendance numbers to those. They've also learned several new skills across the lockdown, so I'm sure they've been, some of them, destroying some of your kitchens, doing some exciting baking, but also sort of learning sort of new crafts. And I'm sure I've seen photos of some of our individuals building lots of new creations. But in terms of their social sort of achievements, I think it's important to point towards a recent student survey that the young people have done. And on the slide here, you'll see some comments that the young people have put out there in terms of how they feel about being a Wheatley Parker. And I think for me, that fills us as a head of year team, myself, Miss Walsh and Miss Hunt, with great pride that we are providing great care for the young people. And I'm under no illusion that will be definitely needed come September. And I'm absolutely excited to deliver that. And I think coming back in September, I think obviously we've been brilliant in terms of delivering regular phone calls, regular check-ins, but we are definitely aware of the challenge that's coming. But I'm sure so are the young people, and they're ready for that. I would also hope that the young people would reflect on this time. So thinking about this moving forward as a longer term impact, the young people would hopefully see this as a challenge that they've mastered and would hopefully improve their resilience. And I think as across the lockdown, it's been very evident to me that obviously in these uncertain times, one thing that is definitely certain to me is this is a very resilient group of young people, and I would hope that would continue come September. My final point this evening, just to touch upon, would be that obviously we're now approaching our summer holiday, and my biggest sort of plea to all of you guys, parents, carers, and young people, would be that you enjoy the rest and take the rest, because we know that September will come around pretty swiftly. But also, if any sort of questions or queries are not answered from tonight, that you please share those with myself or Miss Hunt or Miss Walsh. But yeah, I hope that you all have a brilliant summer, and I look forward to you coming back in September and hopefully getting a chance to formally introduce myself to the parents and carers. And I'll now pass over back to Mrs. Atkins.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Mr. James. And I do hope that you as families and certainly the Year 8 students have enjoyed the contact that you've had from Mr. James, Mrs. Walsh and Mrs. Hunt over the lockdown period. So thank you again for bearing with us despite the technical problems. It's my pleasure to talk through a few things looking forwards now. So having taken over from Mrs. Kendall as Key Stage 3 Pastoral Lead and as Whole School Behaviour Lead back in March, I'm pleased to report that whole school behaviour is doing pretty well at the moment. We're on an all-time low for detention records. But that said, we do know that pastoral needs remain complex, and they definitely need our attention now more than ever. As secondary school staff, we are aware of the difficulties of looking after and home educating children. And so I want to echo Mr. Martin's thanks to you as families of our students who have really helped them to engage with school and with school work as well. In order to support your child's pastoral needs, here at school we have a school health nurse, and I'm pleased to let you know that she, Anna McNally, has provided you with her top tips video. So we're going to show it to you now, and also let you know that she has been working to support many of our students already, and she'll continue to do that in September. So here's Anna's message to you.
Hi, my name's Anna and I am the school nurse for Wheatley Park School. I'm usually based in school at Space to Talk, which is in the lodge. I'm part of a wider team employed by the NHS to work with young people in schools to support them to make healthy choices about their lives through individual appointments and group work. There's been a lot of change for everyone over the past few months, and I know that young people have had lots of different experiences during lockdown, some positive and some not so positive. For some of you, there may be some real concerns about the impact of COVID-19 on your child's emotional well-being and how they're going to cope coming back to school. I will be in school when it opens to help with your child's return by supporting them with their emotional health and well-being. There is a lot of really good information available online to help with the return to school and ways to help with any anxieties and worries that young people may be having. A few top tips. include giving them lots of opportunities to talk about their worries, take these concerns seriously and validate their emotions, help them to see what they can control amongst all the current uncertainty. Also supporting them to re-establish a routine which includes lots of sleep, daily exercise and a healthy diet. All these things have shown to be effective in managing anxiety and promoting well-being. So do have a look at some of the links that we're going to provide for you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone back in school, hopefully very soon.
I hope that you will have found some of the things that Anna McNally, our school health nurse, has said in that video helpful and relevant.
Hi, my name's Anna, and I am...
And your child. So I'm going to look ahead now to September. And as we start to look ahead, I'm hoping that many of you have already submitted questions, and we'll try to answer some of those this evening. Indeed, they've helped to shape some of the content for this evening too. There is an option to submit questions via the general inquiries form on the school website as well. So if you have got questions that remain after this evening, then please do put them on there and we'll do our best to get back to you. So there are 5 areas that I am going to cover in the next section. So looking at what September reopening will look like at Wheatley, what will happen in terms of the curriculum, what will happen about missed milestone events, what will staff expectations of students be like in September, and what preparations can you as parents and carers make for September? So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is to say that we plan to be open full time for all students in September in accordance with the government guidance. And to make it as safe as possible, we have got a few changes that will be in place. So daily life at Wheatley will look slightly different in order to make sure that we can operate as safely as possible here. So there are going to be year group zones. So you can see in the picture there. Year 9, as they will be in September. Each year group will be considered one bubble, and they'll be allocated a specific zone in the school site. So they will be staying in that zone, and it's the teachers who will be rotating to the different classrooms in order to make sure that students can access a normal timetable of teaching, including normal start and finish times of the school day, and also including all of the subjects that they would usually study. Next up is to talk about food. So in order to minimise the risk of contamination, we strongly recommend and we ask that students bring packed lunches so that they have their own lunch that's packed at home to avoid a kind of a risk there, and also to ask that they avoid sharing any food, as they might be in the habit of doing, with friends at school. Next is to talk about transport. So we do know that this will be a concern for many of our families within the school community, and we're working with Oxfordshire County Council to arrive at a suitable solution to make sure that it's safe and practical. And please do look out for further information about this. It'll be in future correspondence via parent mail once we've been able to shape those plans more firmly. Next thing is to talk about cases in our school community. So as a school, we would ask, as we've all been asked nationally, to engage with the NHS test and trace system to enable more efficient tracking and reduction of the spread of COVID-19. If your child or anyone in your household shows signs of COVID, you must isolate immediately. And it's really important that you do not send your child into school. If any students show symptoms of COVID-19 when they're in school, they'll be isolated immediately in the allocated symptoms room in each year group zone. The school will then follow local health guidance about testing and isolating other students and staff too. Next up is to talk about dealing with anxiety. So we understand that for many students, the return to school will represent a challenge that causes them anxiety. And we want to do as much as we can to make sure that we're supporting you and your child in their return to school. So in order to support mental health and wellbeing among students, we intend to have a few things in place in September. One of those is that we are currently planning or looking at virtual assemblies, and that's what we intend to run in September. And the aim of those will be to inform students a bit about what things will look like in school once they're here, before they actually arrive on the school site, so they can enter with some confidence, knowing exactly what will be expected of them, where they'll be expected to be, and so on. We're also looking at a detailed tutor programme on wellbeing, so that will enable some reflection on what's gone on in lockdown, teach some coping strategies, and also inform students of how and where they can access further support. And we'll also be looking at using the pastoral referral form, which is on the WPS student portal, and that is a way of students communicating, contacting their head of year and assistant head of year, and asking to arrange a time when they might be able to discuss things with them. So one of our ways of supporting them there as well. The next thing is to talk about curriculum. So please, we've had lots of questions about this, but please do be reassured that teachers, department leaders and senior leaders are working hard to make sure that the teaching that's planned for September will be appropriately tailored for all students. Some students will have received some feedback in various forms about the work that they've done so far. And across the board, teachers are working to ensure that they know what students know, what they've done and what they've learned during this unusual period of remote learning. And that will help everyone to enable us to have an appropriate starting point in September. So I have to say, I'm really proud at Wheatley Park to be able to sort of say that we know our students have engaged with remote learning in such an active way that on the whole we've been able to continue with meaningful curriculum teaching, and that puts us in quite a good position for September. If your child has worked really well over lockdown, you know they've been engaged in their lessons, they've been tuning into those Google Meets when they've happened, they've been completing work and submitting it, then they should feel really pleased with this achievement, and they should be encouraged that it will stand them in good stead in September and beyond September too. That said, for students who found it more challenging to learn at home, perhaps they've had some distractions, that might be partly because they've been less supervised, as parents who are also working at home can't be supervising, looking over their shoulder all the time. Some students might have had to care for siblings, and they may have had experience of being directly affected by COVID-19 as well. So please understand that Wheatley Park is ready and able to support them in the next step of their learning. Gaps will be addressed, support will be offered, and progress will be made. So there really is no need for you or your child to feel anxious about missed learning. The most important thing at this stage is to ensure that you and your child are ready for the next stage in learning when September comes. Okay, we're going to talk now about milestone events and activities. So something which would have taken place this term is the Lower School Awards Evening, and Year 8 students would have been able to celebrate lots of achievements. And we know that that will have been disappointing to miss for lots of students. We are looking to arrange a celebration of sorts in the autumn term to make sure that that doesn't go completely unrecognised. Moving on to our expectations of students. In terms of behaviour, in order to re-establish the calm and purposeful atmosphere, which we know now characterises the classrooms at Wheatley, we are planning to be pretty strict on behaviour from September, I have to say. We know that it's really important for health and safety for students to be compliant and respectful. And if we're honest, we also know that it is really important for them in terms of knowing that at school, things are as they would normally be in some ways. And certainly in terms of that firm boundary and expectation, we think and we know from experience that that stability will help as well in terms of lots of students reintegrating smoothly into school. In terms of the academic, our expectations remain consistent and ambitious, and we're going to aim to have every student working hard again as soon as possible in September. Students should be ready, respectful and responsible, we know that, and we'll be continuing to reference those values of everyone learning and everyone caring, and also to show students how they can exemplify those in September and beyond. So preparation for September. There are lots of things that we can be doing, and there are a few points that I want to raise. So one is to focus on the positive. So when a child is anxious about returning to school, or even if it's just that they have questions about it and doubts, I think one of the things that we can do to reassure them is to focus on the positive elements. So seeing friends again, returning to the classroom, and also even just having that routine of getting to school, attending school, coming home again, that difference in the day-to-day, which should be welcome and positive. Another point is routine. So in the cases where, and we know this has happened for a few, bedtimes have slipped, getting up in the morning has slipped to being quite late, we would recommend, where possible, that students are encouraged to start to ease back towards an earlier get-up time and so on ahead of September, just to help to smooth that integration back in to the school routine. Reassurance, so telling them everything's going to be okay, so reassuring them about the new measures. We know that in terms of COVID and our numbers and so on, there is still quite a way to go before September. And we can reassure that whatever the latest advice is in social distancing, face coverings, hand washing, or whatever, this will be in place at school and will need to be respected from September. The next one, picture of Mr. Martin and some of our students, is about uniform. So one thing which has been pointed out by a few heads of year and a few parents as well is a reminder to everybody to get students to try on their uniform, because some of them, I'm sure, will have had growth spurts over the last few months, and very many of them won't have been wearing uniform since the 20th, was it, of March. So I think that is a helpful reminder ahead of September. Finally, the virtual assembly. So as I've mentioned, this is our intention, what we would hope to do, and we will update you on that in order to make sure that students are really, really well informed of the very latest plans once we get to September. So I hope to have covered many of your most pressing questions. And as I've said, if you do have further questions following this, then please do get in touch via the general inquiries form on the school website, or of course you can email us, the team, directly too. I'm going to hand back now to Mr. Martin, who's going to close off our evening for tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, and thank you also, Dan, before you, for your inputs tonight. That's the end of this presentation. Thank you again very much for joining us this evening, and apologies that the live streaming didn't work on this occasion. Who knows, maybe we'll have another opportunity to try and get that one right. I'm sure that after hearing what you've heard tonight, you still have many questions racing about in your brain. So as Heather said, please do get those through to us via the general inquiries link on our school website. But I hope that you're going away from this evening feeling a little bit maybe more reassured around September than you were beforehand. It's definitely the case that we've been given a pretty tight time frame to put in place probably the biggest logistical operation that I've had to oversee since joining the school 3.5 years ago. And whilst I think we'll be able to provide a little bit more detail to you before the end of term, I realistically don't think all our plans are going to have the T's crossed and the I's dotted by the end of term. So inevitably, we will need to be communicating with you over the summer. I'm really confident that in good time for the actual start in September, we will have comprehensive plans, and we will have been able to get to you a full risk assessment and all that granular detail that you need to feel absolutely confident that your child is going to be safe and to return to weekly part to get a good standard of education. But some of that communication inevitably is going to have to come in those final few weeks leading up to the start of school in September. So please keep a weather eye on your parent mail and be aware and ready to receive that extra information then. For now, I'm sure that your young people and yourselves are in need of a good break from all things school related. And I very much hope that over the next few weeks, you'll be able to achieve that, and that the weather will be favourable. It's not so favourable at the moment as we're recording this, looking out of my window. So I just want to thank you once again for participating in this evening, and to wish you a very healthy and a happy summer holiday. Thank you.